Welcome to The Beau Show, an Epoch TV and NTD co-production, and the home of faith, family, and freedom. Once again, these three topics keep returning to the fore as we head into the midterm elections next month. Hold on to your seats, guys, because this is a wild race to the end. And you know that I've made some predictions about the midterms, which I will revisit after November 8th. But until then, I want to analyze some of the hot races. Today, I want to focus on the Pennsylvania Senate race between John Fetterman and Dr. Mehmet Oz. I don't know if you could find two more opposite people in such a race in physicality, health, articulation, and philosophy. That makes this race quite stark in terms of what Pennsylvanians have to choose from. Nexstar TV held the first and only debate between these two candidates, which John Fetterman had been sheepish about and was stalling following a stroke that he had that might show some of his weaknesses. Nexstar owns the relatively new News Nation, which just signed on Chris Cuomo, the disgraced ex-CNN commentator, after he openly helped his brother, disgraced ex-governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, who was in a major sexual harassment scandal. I'm a little surprised they didn't pick bicep-pumping Cuomo to moderate this debate, but I did notice some irregularities right away in this Nexstar-hosted debate. Listen to how they refer to Dr. Oz.
Pennsylvanians are struggling to put food on the table and gas in their cars. Our Nexstar Emerson College The Hill poll shows the economy and inflation are the biggest concerns for voters. 39% of them listed that as the top issue. Beginning with you, Mr. Oz.
They refer to him as Mr. Oz, not Dr. Oz. This has to be intentional. When a former vice president like Joe Biden is in debates, he is referred to as Vice President Biden, not Mr. Biden. Imagine if they called him Mr. Biden when in debate with Mr. Trump. They'd be shocked. And what about Dr. Jill Biden? Do they ever call her Mrs. Biden? She has a PhD, not even an MD. I wonder if this inconspicuous titling was intended to try to remove both the medical degree title from his name, which he earned, as well as remove the association of his former TV show, The Dr. Oz Show, where he offered his medical advice. Smartly, though, Dr. Oz used his surgical expertise to talk about how he would surgically aid the number one issue to Pennsylvanians, which is the economy. Now, let's look at some of Fetterman's responses.
Mr. Fetterman, your opponent has criticized Democratic spending, as you heard. Has the Biden administration overspent? And if so, where do you think spending should be cut? You have 60 seconds.
No, here's what I think we have to fight about inflation here right now. That's what we need to fight about inflation, right now, because it's a tax on working families, and Dr. Oz can't possibly understand what that is like. He has 10 gigantic mansions. We must push back against corporate greed. We must make sure that we're also pushing back against price gouging as well, too. We also be able to make more in Pennsylvania and make more in America. When he had a choice to make his merchandise, the Oz label is on, he made it all in China. Who can you believe that can fight against inflation and pushing back against corporate greed, or somebody that is choosing working in China versus over American workers?
Now look, I know Fetterman had a stroke. That is the elephant in the room. But when you run for U.S. Senate, you have to show mental agility, decision-making, shrewd leadership, and logic. Fetterman showed none of that. It's almost like watching Biden. He took a few awkward seconds even to collect himself, and then sounded like a nervous teenager giving his first-class speech. This is also the first time that I've seen Fetterman in a suit. Normally, he campaigns and goes on TV in a hoodie. But even John Fetterman calls his opponent Dr. Oz, while the Nexstar moderators insist on calling him Mr. Oz. And check this out when they debated about Dr. Oz's wealthy homes versus Oz's claim that Fetterman lives off of his parents.
No, That's like he got his Pennsylvania
All right,
house
Mr. Fetterman.
from his own inlays from a dollar.
Inlays? I presume he meant to say in-laws. On the issue of energy and gas prices, listen to this question and answer.
In an op-ed for the Wilkes-Barre Times Leader, you wrote, quote, "It is time we crack down on the big price gouging corporations that are making record profits while jacking up prices for all of us." How do you plan to do this, sir? You mentioned going after price gouging corporations. How do you plan to do this? You have 30 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. We have to keep pushing back on that. And he would never make that choice to fight for families here in Pennsylvania. He has never met an oil company that he doesn't swipe right about. He has never been able to stand up for working families all across Pennsylvania. We must push back. Inflation has hurt Americans and Pennsylvania's families, and it has given the oil companies record profits.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Fetterman.
Did you hear an answer? Why did this moderator let that slide? That is a lack of journalistic responsibility. When she asks, how do you aim to go after gas companies, he just stumbled around and circumvented the question. Is that a responsible answer for Pennsylvanians paying at the pump? She completely let that go. On the issue of raising the minimum wage, see if you can follow this answer.
I have a follow-up for you, Mr. Fetterman. What do you say to small business owners who have told us that if the minimum wage were increased to $15 an hour, it would put them out of business? You have 30 seconds.
No, we all have to make sure that everyone that works is able to, that's the most American bargain, that if you work full-time, you should be able to live in dignity as well, true. And I believe they haven't have any businesses being we can't have businesses being subsidized by not paying individuals that just simply can't afford to pay their own way.
I couldn't follow any of that. Maybe the moderators don't follow up because they can't follow his logic. I don't know. I have yet to hear him answer a single question with lucidity or logic yet. Here's how Oz responded.
John Fetterman shoots too low. We want much more money than that. And there are many ways to achieve that, but John Fetterman thinks the minimum wage is his weekly allowance from his parents. He's not really cognizant of the real challenges of business owners who've got to balance that with employees. Thankfully, we have a solution. And John, you didn't answer the question. You can't put businesses out of commission in order to pay more wages, because the wages will go to zero, which is John Fetterman's radical plan if you really follow it to conclusion. Here's what I would do. We have one of the richest energy states in the country. I believe if we could unleash the energy beneath our feet here in Pennsylvania, there'd be plenty of money to go around. We'd have increased wages, more reason for students to take vocational classes to be able to learn trades, which I'm strongly supportive of. We'd also be able to pipe that gas, improve our economy, and reduce inflation. That's a plan that works, and it's humble enough that I can say it broadly.
Thank you.
Obviously, Oz actually answers the question, but does it in a way that also ties in Pennsylvania's rich energy sources. When you think about the minimum wage, you have to think about how businesses will respond to hikes in the minimum wage. For instance, we will see a day when McDonald's will no longer have employees because AI machines will do the job quicker and better. If you've ever gone to a McDonald's after midnight, you know what I mean. It decimates the title of fast food, and you're not even sure what you're getting in the bag by the time that you get it. Companies will automate what can be replaced by robots. Now, Chick-fil-A will probably never do that because their business model is based on a family concept and a certain level of kindness and customer service. Look how many people that they serve every day, except for Sundays, and look how they do it. It's a well-oiled machine, but of human manpower. What Dr. Oz was saying is that market forces can drive a wage way above $15 an hour by unleashing energy potential and incentives for education, trade schools, and the like. In other words, people have to look beyond minimum wage jobs by engaging in higher education and market forces that make Pennsylvania a more business-friendly state. Fetterman has called the energy sector a stain on Pennsylvania. On the issue of abortion, which is pretty much the Democrats' only dog whistle, the two candidates explained their positions. John Fetterman is for codifying Roe v. Wade, and Oz is for what the Supreme Court recently did, which is to leave it to the states to decide, and then subsequently women and their doctors. Dr. Oz was asked about this new Lindsey Graham-backed federal bill that would outlaw abortion after 15 weeks. Oz said that he's against any federal law that interferes with states' rights. After he answered that, the moderator said this.
Mr. Oz, I want a 15-second clarification. You are saying that you would leave it up to the states, that the federal government does not have a role here. So are you saying you would not vote for the Lindsey Graham bill?
Any bill that violates what I said, which is the federal government interfering with the state rule on abortion, I would vote against. What I feel strongly about is that women in Pennsylvania understand what I'm saying and not believe that someone who's taken an extreme position like John Fetterman represents them, because most women do not believe that we should, at a federal level, codify 38 weeks of permission to have an abortion and have taxpayers pay for it.
So a yes or no on the Lindsey Graham bill?
I think I've answered this very, very clearly 3 times, Lisa.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Oz.
She asks him 3 times about the same question, for which he gave the same answer. Why is she not doing this with Fetterman when he dodges questions and gives incoherent, rambling non-answers? I have to point this out because I think moderators of debates in this country are really, really bad. I think they come from a position of bias. Even previous moderators of Fox hosted debates. They can't be trusted. Personally, I would rather see Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, Howard Stern, or even Ben Shapiro host a debate, because at least they are intellectually consistent and fair, and they will press for an answer. They do it in a fair way. I find myself constantly frustrated with the way debates are held in this country. They are boring, and more importantly, they look favoritist. But let's hear Fetterman's position on late-term abortions.
I support on Roe v. Wade. That was the law of the land for 50 years. He celebrated when it fell down, and I would fight to reestablish on Roe v. Wade. That's what I run on. That's what I believe, and I've always believed that the choice believes women and their doctors, and he believes that the choice should be with him or Republican legislators all across this nation.
Believes? I'm not sure what that means, but I think we are again seeing the effects of that stroke. Oz pointed out that Fetterman has had multiple TV stations take his ads down, even on Nexstar, because they have been dishonest or flat out false. The moderator asked Fetterman about that. He had no answer. Watch also the way the moderator takes up for Fetterman.
On this debate stage, he said very specifically in his primary debate, when he was still debating, that he would support 38 weeks of mandated rules by the federal government that would prevent any state from blocking it. So that's not Roe versus Wade.
That's not true. I support Roe v. Wade. That's the simple.
John,
Roe
you
v. Wade.
said specifically you would support
Right,
a federal rule on 38
Oz,
weeks.
thank you.
But how
Thank
could-
you.
that's-
We-
I think
we
it's
wa-
important that John at least acknowledge that he's not honest here, because you said the
All right,
opposite
Mr.
on
Oz,
TV.
we must continue on. Mr. Fetterman, turning to you.
So when Oz presses Fetterman to be honest about the 38-week abortion statute, the moderator cuts Oz off and moves on. Do you see what I mean? The moderator should stop right there and ask him to clarify. She spent 3 times asking Oz the same question, killing time, but doesn't want to press Fetterman about his prior statements and debates. See what I'm saying? This is why debate moderators are terrible.